Chapter 19. Mr. Victor Prince and the Crombie Overcoat. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. The following extract is taken from my loose-leaf diary and relates to a remarkable experience which demonstrates the wonder and way of the Spirit of God leading and teaching a believer. On Friday, the 30th of August 1974, I was off duty from work, and during the day I was rebuilding our garage roof at 37 Finmere Crescent. During the day I was thinking about the way God had dealt with me and led me thus far. I realised that each one that is a child of God was special, and God dealt personally. Each person had his own peculiar special work of God in his life or her life, a work done in no other and special to them. All were saved, being involved in a common salvation, but the work of God was peculiar and special to that individual. I, in this frame of mind, began to wonder about a peculiar trouble that I caused a Mr. Victor Prince. Mr. Prince was a tailor, and some years ago, previously, about 5 years, I had employed him to make me a Crombie overcoat when I'd just been released from Borstal. It was to cost me £45, and I gave him £5 deposit to start the work. At that time, I was living in London doing a government training course, learning radio and television servicing. My brother was due to be released from prison on home leave. He had a coat made by someone else a year previously, and on his home leave he came to see the coat before it was finished. After hearing how long it had been in the making, he said it was taking far too long, and he persuaded me to tell Mr. Prince it wasn't good enough. He then poked holes in the coat in front of Mr. Prince and told him to stick the coat. Later on the telephone we were nasty to Mr. Prince. Mr. Prince thought I was saying I couldn't afford to buy it and offered to keep it until I could pay. It was made specially for me and really would not do anyone else. I left it with Mr. Prince and thought no more about it until when I was on the garage roof that day. I felt bad about the way I treated him and would have apologised to him if I could. My mind was thinking upon the subject of predestination and reasoned that God had planned everything in creation to bring about a display of his glory and grace in Jesus Christ. I was a person created by God, being responsible and accountable to God, having a definite purpose for my existence. I was alive and active, but God was working in and through me. I had been predestined to obtain salvation by Jesus Christ, this work of salvation being a means of displaying God's love, mercy and grace towards me. It was not my free will that saved me, but God's free grace that made me willing in the day of his power. Therefore glory was due to God the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. Feeling wretched over the way I treated Mr. Prince, I had resolved in my mind to pay the money I owed Mr. Prince and apologise to him if ever I was to meet him again. It was 1 week later, on Sunday, 8th of September 1974, that I saw the amazing hand of God at work. Mrs. Knight of Mount Street spoke to me on the way home from the Pentecostal church at Bearton. She said her husband Ken had met someone they had not seen for a long time. I stopped her speaking and told her it was Mr. Prince. She was amazed and wondered how I knew. They had met Mr. Prince in Aylesbury, and he had thought to ask Ken, Grace's husband, to repair his television set. They said perhaps they would take me along to do it, if he remembered me. He certainly did. Mrs. Knight was able to inform him of me becoming a Christian, and he left it to them to make the arrangements to get his television fixed. I had not mentioned a thing to Mrs. Knight. There was no way of this happening by chance. God had done it. The first Sunday after this we all went to visit Mr. Prince, but he was out to a harvest Thanksgiving service at the Methodist Church, so we made an arrangement to go on the 18th of September. At first I didn't know what to say. I was extremely embarrassed, so I said very little. I soon repaired the TV set, then spoke to Mr. Prince about what had happened. I apologised and offered to pay the money I owed him, quite forgetting about the coat. It turned out he still had the coat, even after several moves, and the money I owed him was £38. All I was asked to do was pay the £34, so I paid this by cheque. The cheque number was 183901. I now have my new coat. It's a dark blue, handmade Crombie overcoat.